that your ways are better. I'm not on the fence. Who distributes joy? Who sets the soul free? Who can forgive sin? Jesus, who died for me? Yes, it's true that I've been captured by your love. I've been captured by your grace. I've been covered by your blood. I was lost, but now I'm found. Yes, it's true you hold me down. Jesus, here's my white flag. I surrender right now. Jesus, here's my white flag. I surrender right now. I surrender right now. I surrender right now. Jesus, here's my white flag. I surrender right now. Right now. Right now. I surrender right now. Run away or go take a hiatus. When the descendant of David's proven he is the greatest. You see, he mediates, he is the mediator. Now I am so free. What a sweet savior. I found a real love, and he is my ransom. Not gonna escape, I'm gonna stay. I'm captured, but I'm so free. And I finally know that I'm where I'm supposed to be. So I raise my hand, I get on my knees. There's nothing like the day the Spirit captured me. And I know what greater. I surrender, I don't need another savior. I'm never gonna run. My ship was a wreck, I couldn't pay the debt, and I lost all my treasure. So I hit the deck, when I saw you better, I knew I'd never run, and I'm staying forever. Right now, I surrender right now. I surrender right now. Jesus, here's my white flag. I surrender right now. Right now, right now. I surrender right now.
Turn me up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the In Faith Podcast. My name is David, and I'm also joined here by Steve. Oh, that's not Steve.
Scripture.
There we go. There's Steve.
But hey, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I gotta get my buttons situated here. I don't know why that happened, but regardless, see, Steve, it's the 3 weeks we took off. We can't keep taking these 3 weeks off.
I know.
And not doing an episode. So we are back for this week. We're all going to be out of town next week. Well, I won't be out of town, but we're going to be doing other stuff. Steve,
we can do it.
Do you think we'll be able to do an episode next week at some point? Okay.
We'll do an episode.
We'll do an episode next week.
Yeah.
We've already been out 3 weeks and trying to catch up at where we're at. But let's see. Thanksgiving happened.
Mm-hmm.
You were out of town. You go to Texas with your family, which you tell your brother I said hi.
I will,
because I remember we met him once about a couple of years back. He came to an event we were at, and I like the dude, man. He's good people. But so you go out there Christmas, Thanksgiving, and then I remember. So even when what was it week before? So last week. There was some function that I was at for work. Week before that, we should have just recorded our fellowship here. That's what we should have done. But we came, we sat down, we were ready to have an episode, and then we just ended up having some good fellowship, and then kind of pushing it off. But we are going to pick up back today with where we left off in Moses. And just to catch people up here, from what we remembered from the last episode, the part 2 of Moses in the series Men of the Bible. Moses was God came down, spoke to Moses, and kind of gave him the layout. You're going to go back into Egypt. You're going to speak to Pharaoh and the people. And Moses wasn't having it. He was like, no. He's remembering what happened last time when he was there. Everybody wanted to. He was kind of had a hit out on him, and God assured him, everybody who wanted to kill you then, they're all gone now. And so Moses came up with another excuse. Oh, well, I'm not the guy for it, send somebody else. And, okay, well, I'm not, what if they don't believe me? God gave him the 3 signs to show that he was the one who sent him. And so then Moses came up with another excuse and said, I'm not that great with words. Please, send somebody else. And that's when God said, you know what? We from what we read, we see God had enough.
Mhm.
He was just tired of entertaining this. Basically, you're going to do what I am directing you to do, what I've called you to do. We always have this saying now where it's going to be, it's either God's will or God's will, right? And then either way, it's gonna unfold the way that He has it. We can make it more difficult, or we could make a shorter journey longer. But eventually, we're going to come back, and it's going to be God's will, right? So God says, "Okay, I'll send your brother." And we imagine Moses hasn't spoken to his brother in quite some time, but he says, I'm going to send your brother Aaron with you. Matter of fact, he's already on his way, and he'll go speak for you. So where we're going to start off today, we're going to start off in Exodus 5 at verse 1. So this is when they make it over to Egypt, right? And let me see here. Yeah, Moses returns to Egypt, and I want to say that they have already kind of been talking. If we go to 4,
They have. They've already talked with the Hebrews and convinced them that Moses had met with God, and now they were going to meet with Pharaoh.
right, you're right, because then we do see that it does pan out in that way, where Aaron is speaking for Moses at this point. So yeah, that's where they are. In the last verse of Exodus 4, it says, Moses and Aaron brought together all of the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. So we do see that what God gave them, these tools, these signs to show them, it worked. Just as God gave them that confirmation, you do these signs and they will have to believe. And even then, Moses is like, oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Just send somebody else. And I can't think of how many times I've tried to do that too. I'm like, I just don't feel like I'm called to that. And you end up somehow rummaging up the courage to go through with it, or even better, you get put in a position or situation where you almost don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we move on to Exodus 5, verse 1, it says, after Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness. In verse 2, it says, Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, and that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. So this is kind of the first time in this journey, aside of Moses' pushback, that he's getting to see, because I can easily, if Moses was giving God such a hard time, oh, they're not going to believe me, then they get to the people and he shows them the signs, they believe him. Now he gets to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm not going to let the people go. This is the first kind of pushback that Moses gets, kind of the same that he was dishing out just prior to.
Yeah, but what's interesting is God told Moses ahead of time, Pharaoh's not going to let your people go.
Right.
So he already knows that Pharaoh is going to push back. So I guess that can make you more hesitant as well. Often when we go forward into something God is calling us to do, our idea of what success looks like and God's idea of what success looks like are very, very, very different. I promise you, Moses' idea of success was Pharaoh. Oh, well, thanks, Moses. Thanks for letting me know that. Yes, you could all go out and have 3 days in the desert. I mean, that's what Moses would consider success. But that wasn't God's plan.
No.
God wants to show his power to the Egyptians.
And if only it were that easy, if only it were that easy that he could just show up, say, hey, this is what God said. So go right along and
By
do
all
it.
means.
Yeah, by all means, go ahead. Yeah, no, of course I will. But no, he gets pushed back. God tells him that he's going to get pushed back. But it kind of makes me think here that if God is calling you to do something, like he's calling Moses to go and speak to Pharaoh, and then says, but he won't believe you, but don't worry, I have a plan, right? So that kind of is like, you know what, okay, first shot, I know he's not going to believe, but I'm pretty sure God has a plan. So we read that after Pharaoh says that he won't let Israel go, then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Or he may strike us with the plague or with the sword. So now he's giving them the ultimatum. Look, this is what God said. And if you're not going to do it, this is what he said he was going to do. This is what's going to happen. But in verse 4, we read that the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. So he seems more concerned of productivity than, what God's plan within 3 days, than 3 days in the wilderness. So
Think that happens today.
yeah, in a way. But
Like stores that have to be open 7 days a week, stores that are open 24 hours a day.
holidays, weekends, all that.
Yeah. They open Thanksgiving night.
Yeah. I mean, we do see a lot of that. That's so focused on
Yeah.
productivity, labor, profit,
Mm-hmm.
sales, as opposed to what the holiday is celebrating. And
Right.
that's kind of what really where I'm stuck in the middle of too, because I've been at places, I've worked at places that are open like that. They may close a bit early on a holiday, but 9 times out of 10, they're not. But then you do have, fields like my wife's where she's in
Sure.
the medical field, and emergency services
Yeah.
don't close.
No, you need to be open.
Right. So they,
Just like, the nuclear reactor, we would prefer that people stay there and make sure that everything is working
Yeah.
correctly.
so I'm a little stuck in between, thinking about why we celebrate these holidays, like the one coming up, like Christmas. We're celebrating Jesus, but there's still going to be people working, and there's still going to be companies on Christmas Day that, don't care more about profits than they do why we're celebrating. But at the same time, I think of those necessity fields, those essential services that if they shut down, everybody would lose their mind.
Well, it's funny too, because you think of Jesus pointing that out to the Pharisees that were challenging him for healing
Mhm.
on the Sabbath, where he pointed out, well, if you have a ox that falls in a ditch on the Sabbath, aren't you going to pull it out? The obvious answer is yes, but they're pulling it out because that ox is profit to them.
Yeah.
So he's pointing out that they're suggesting don't heal on the Sabbath, yet that's for the benefit of people, just purely benefit, yet something that's for profit. The Pharisees were very willing to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can be thankful that clarification was made, because can you imagine today that if they really were holding that you cannot lift a finger on the Sabbath, what would we do when we needed 911 or we needed emergency services or something bad happens? It's like, oh man, we can't. Nobody's working today, so save your own life. But you can't because that's work, right? That's labor.
And yet, if we had to say on a Sabbath, that forces dependence on God, that we might not have otherwise. Our dependence is on men, other men, and what they know, and expertise and things like that. We believe that God is able to heal. We believe that God is actively working in this world. And we believe that God knows all of our circumstances and what's going on.
Yeah.
So that if we're stuck in a position on a day that nobody's doing anything, it would absolutely force us to have faith in God to take care of us.
Right. So here's a small rabbit hole we're going to go down. Right? Technically, we should be doing that every day. Right?
Yes. Even when we have access to medical, when the hospital, like you say, because we have access, you would never say, I'm not going to use this.
Right.
In my opinion, you wouldn't say, I'm not going to use this because I'm dependent on God. Well, no, God gave us the abilities to do the healings and such. So without God, there's none of that anyhow. And reality is that Christianity is who created hospitals and has spread them abroad in the whole world. And before they were, I know they're supposed to be nonprofit items and such today, but it doesn't feel that way and it doesn't seem that way, but we still see the remnants of the starts of these hospitals.
Right.
Hospitals will still say St. Matthew or some saint on the hospital, St. Luke's, that type of thing, where it was started as a benefit to people, thinking of other people rather than profit.
Right. So we should be doing that anyway because, God uses each and every one of us. And it reminded me, like you said, he knows what we need. He knows our circumstance. He knows our condition. And when he puts and calls these people to be in our paths to help in such a way, we have to trust that God's plan was to use this doctor, this surgeon, this emergency responder to essentially help and heal. And we know that's of God's hand, but we also know that he uses other people for his work, including, myself, you, everybody around, even though I will say even the ones who are skeptical or didn't to believe are still in a way being used because, and here's why I say this, Steve, and then we'll get back on track here. I say this because I can look back at a time where I wasn't so much believing or walking with God, and I can look back today and see all the ways that he showed up in my life, even when I wasn't believing, and the ways I was used in my life when I still wasn't believing. I would I would replace God's work with something else, with it's a coincidence, it's a shot of luck, it's it just worked out, and you would replace that thank God with something else.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that God's using other people, and clearly that's where we are with Moses, right? Moses is presenting God to the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
He's presenting the one true God, and God is talking through him. Just like in our lives, God speaks to us sometimes through other people. And it may not be the people we want speaking through us, but he does speak through other people, and we've got to keep our ears attuned to know and see that that message is a message from God.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that Pharaoh isn't paying any mind to the message of God, even after being told. And I could kind of see how it wouldn't be that simple to, this is what Moses is saying, but look, look, the people they've tripled and doubled and they've grown and they're working. Why would you take them away from their labor?
Well, and then I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In Pharaoh's mind as well, he's got to be thinking, well, if the God of the Hebrews is so powerful and all, why have they been our slaves for 400 years?
Mm-hmm.
Why now? Why should I believe anything different is going to happen now?
Well, and look, it says, that's what would make it kind of be, oh, well, yeah, why now? Why now? Not knowing, I think, that we know now, God's timing is everything. His timing's not our timing, so why now? Well, because that's when God has it in his plan. But in verse 6, we see that the same day Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people, it says you are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. It goes on to say they are lazy, and that is why they are crying out. Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. I'm going to ask you a question real quick, Steve, because as I'm reading this, going back to verse 6, that same day Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers of the people. We go on to see what that order is. So Pharaoh, just to confirm, Pharaoh's telling the guys that are in charge of the people working that these are the orders that he's giving, that you're no longer to supply the people with straw for making their bricks, but you're not going to have them make their own bricks. Calls them lazy, but don't reduce the quota.
Right. So he just made it much harder for them to meet the quota because it takes time to find your own straw for the bricks.
Okay, so makes
we
sense.
know that at any job. Imagine you show up at a job site and whatever you're building, and you're supposed to already have a stack of lumber there for you. Well, the lumber's not there. You have to go to the store and buy it yourself, get it delivered, everything else. It takes a bunch of time. Are you going to get as much built that day as you would have had the lumber already been there?
So, okay, yeah. So it was the guys that are in charge of the slave drivers. They were kind of providing them with some of the material.
Yeah,
and
they would bring the straw.
So essentially what he's doing is he's saying, you know what, don't do it anymore. Make them work for it. Make them, get everything. Let's make them work harder so that they don't have time to pay attention to this.
Right. It's kind of that classic way of punishing somebody. He doesn't punish Moses directly, but he punishes the people that Moses is representing.
So they do. They listen to what they're being told. So they go down, the slave drivers, they go down and tell the people, this came from Pharaoh. We're no longer going to give you straw. You need to go out and find it. And by the way, your work will not be reduced. Your quota won't be reduced. You're still going to have to meet all the same expectations while taking more time to go find your own material, to then make the material, to then build whatever they're building at the time.
Bricks.
Well, yeah, they're using the bricks. They're making the bricks, but then they're using the bricks to build what I assume adding on to.
Here they're just talking about making them.
Okay. So we don't get to see what they're using the bricks for. We just see that they're making the bricks.
Right.
So looks like the people listen, verse 12. So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, "Complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had the straw." I don't see this being a reality or even a possibility. How much? Okay, so you talk about, modern day. Okay, well, my material is not on the job site. I need to go get it. We go to the store and get it.
Mm-hmm.
They had to go find it themselves.
Right.
So
They had to go cut the straw.
yeah, I can imagine that it was very time consuming,
Mm-hmm.
scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw to then make the brick.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first few days, there's no possible way at all to do it. Now, if they were able to, if they found the field and all that kind of stuff, and they were able to get a bunch of straw and have it, and maybe they would get to where if they worked extra hours, get close to making, my guess is they're already working all the daylight that exists. So there's probably no extra work you can do. You can only work when the sun's up. But there's no way at the very beginning. You're correct. There's no possible way at the beginning that they can make their quota because they have no straw and they have to go get it. They have to they have to cut it, they have to bring it, then they have to make bricks.
Well, and what they end up doing is demanding that the work be done in the same amount of time,
Right.
and it's not happening. So what are they doing? They continue to drive them. They continue to demand, and then they're beating them and asking them, why haven't you met your quota of bricks yesterday or today? The same way you would as before. Well, the answer's simple. It's because now we have to go find our own material. Now we have to go find our own straw.
Right.
And then we read in verse 13, then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh, saying, "Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet are told to make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people by not telling them, or by telling them, don't give them anything, make them go get it themselves." Pharaoh then responds to calling them lazy again. As Pharaoh said, "Lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.'" So essentially what he's saying is, that's why you keep asking for 3 days off. But what he's not getting,
you just want time off.
right. Yeah, that's all he's thinking. Here's the funny thing, and I don't know why this this just popped into my head as somebody who at work would think about production. He's actually getting less production
Because of his punishment.
Right.
Yeah.
He's getting less production by doing things his way than he would have giving them those 3 days off to go sacrifice to the Lord.
Yeah, it would seem maybe he has a control issue as well. That he most definitely has to be in control of these things, and why is he going to let somebody roam off and do something that to him is a waste of time?
Right.
So if he were asking the same thing, he knows it would just be an excuse to have days off. That's the way Pharaoh sees it, and I think that's the way a lot of bosses in America see it.
Well, yeah, and he doubles down.
Yeah.
Pharaoh doubles down on his demand, even after they appeal to Pharaoh, and he then tells him again, calls him lazy, and says, "Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks." He says, "Now get to work," and then doubles down and reinforces, "You're still not going to get any straw. We're no longer providing it for you. You need to go get it. You need to go find it. Yeah. And you need to still meet your full quota." So the Israelite overseers in verse 19 realized that they were in trouble when they were told, "You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day." When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron awaiting to meet them. And they said, "May the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." But what did let's look back at what Moses warned. with Pharaoh the first time when he first spoke with him and said, that if they don't he doesn't let the people go, make their sacrifice to God and have their festival, that it would either be a plague or a sword, right? Plague, let's see.
Yeah, or sickness. Yeah.
Yep. So it says he may strike us with plagues or with a sword. And that's in the NIV. But I think it's kind of interesting that it gets brought back up. He's saying, you put a sword in their hand to kill us. It's like, no, he put the sword in that hand.
And yet, often we would treat it the same way and consider it the same way. Why did you have to go to Pharaoh and start, ruffling feathers and stuff after? Okay, we got to back up a step, right? Moses and Aaron go to the Hebrews and they go, look, we've met with God. God says, this is what we need to do. And they believe them. Then Moses and Aaron go in front of Pharaoh and they tell Pharaoh. And how does Pharaoh react? Again, he doesn't react the way Moses wanted him to and says, sure, bye. 3 days. Yeah, go ahead. But he doesn't just say no. He says no. And by the way, don't continue bothering me with this. This is what happens when you come in and ask me to get off of work for 3 days. I'm going to double or triple your work.
Yeah.
So don't ask again, is what Pharaoh is saying. And that's all it took. Now, mind you, it's painful, right? This is, I can't make light of what the Hebrews are then going through. So they're already slave labor, making bricks every day, every minute the sun's up. And now, not only is it impossible for them to make it, they get beat at the end of the day for not making their quota.
And knowing they're not going to.
So it just got extremely hard to do what God called them to do. Extremely hard.
Well, and in verse 22, we can see the frustration in Moses. And I can relate to this because I'm somebody who can be told something once and then I'll, start to question my own understanding of it. I'm like, are you sure? I'll have to go back. Are you sure? Are you sure? This is what you said, right? Is that still the case? Are you sure? And that's what Moses does with God here.
And I would just thinking of that often in some of our Christian circles, we regularly think of getting confirmation that what we heard is from God.
Right.
And I promise you, if when we, do what God tells us to do and we get punished by in some manner, most of the time people will say, oh, that must not have been from God. But those are bad ways of checking and seeing. If you know it's from God, you know it's from God in you.
Right.
And you go forward.
Well,
and God will confirm it again for you as you go through.
Well, and I think the only time we think of the punishment of something that and then say, oh, it's not from God, is our own understanding of, because Moses could easily have said this, or I guess Moses couldn't because he actually spoke to God. But one of the what was it, the Hebrews?
Yeah,
that they spoke to could have said, "Are you sure that came from God? Because that didn't go well." And that was what I could kind of relate to. Is like, are you sure this is what this is what's going to happen? Okay. Yeah, that's what I told you. Okay. Well, are you sure? And I do this quite a bit, especially over time where there's a plan in place and that plan's going to take a while to unfold. Let's say for an example, you get told something at work. Okay, this is what this is the track we're on. This is what we want to do with you. This is what we're going to line you up for. And then some time goes on, you don't hear anything. You're like, hey, are you sure this is still the case? Oh, okay, I just wanted to double check because I haven't heard anything. But I find myself constantly doing that. And then now I see Moses in verse 22 returning to the Lord and saying, why, Lord? Why have you brought trouble on these people? Is this why you sent me? So he's going back and he's saying, is this the real reason you sent me? Because that's not why you told me why you sent me. But is this the real reason why you sent me? He said, ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on these people, and you have not rescued your people at all. But again, I can see the significance in putting his own timeline on it, saying, "Yeah, you told me to go talk to Pharaoh, and nothing came of it,
Right.
except for trouble and hardship on these people. Is that the only reason you sent me? Is so that would happen?" You know,
Right.
but
Purely out of frustration
yeah,
that Moses is saying that. He doesn't believe that, but he doesn't like that it's not happening how he thought it would happen, even though God warned him,
yeah.
I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. He will not let you go.
hmm Well, and God has a plan.
Yeah.
He told him it wasn't going to happen, and that he had a plan. What his plan was, and then we do get to see in chapter 6 that God's revealing his plan. He's sticking to it. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Now you will see what I do to Pharaoh because of my mighty hand, and he will let them go.'" But I just think think it's I'll continue. It says, "Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country." Yeah, that's the remainder to verse 1. But I can just I could see so much of my own flaws in relation to Moses. And because I would have gone back, and instead of going back, calmly and saying, "Hey, God, I did what you asked. Thank you for using me. It happened the way you said it was going to happen. What now?" Instead of going back and looking for that direction, he goes back in a panic. He goes back, "Is that the only reason you sent me? This is what I witnessed. That was so jacked up. Why would you not only put me to go instigate that, but you put your people through that you were asking Pharaoh to let free, and now you haven't done anything. You haven't freed him. All you've done is make it worse for him."
It's kind of funny that the Moses is like, I don't know, maybe half a step away from saying, "You double crossed me, God."
Yeah, it seems like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like he's just, and I could see, it's just funny. I can see myself, being like, "What? I know you said that wouldn't work, but you didn't say that it would make it harder for others. I mean, he's punishing them for me going to him and telling him what you said. Now you need to fix this, and you're not doing it." But he is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
He is doing it, and he gives him this confirmation. "Now you will see what I do to Pharaoh." Right? So God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord." So he reconfirms that. He um, doubles down on who he is and says, "I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they resided as foreigners." He says in verse 5, "Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant." So not only is he reconfirming that he has a plan, that he's going to free his people, but he's telling Moses, like, "Do you know," almost like this, "Do you know who you're talking to?"
Right.
Be like, I appeared to Abraham. I appeared to Isaac and Jacob as God Almighty, but I didn't, he's like, "I didn't make myself known the way I am with you." Now I can almost see it like this. This isn't what the scripture says, but I can see it. Like, do you know who you're talking to here? Like, I haven't freed them, but do you know what I can do by my hands? So he's telling them, moreover, he's like, "I know, I have heard the groans of the Israelites, and I know they're enslaved, and I haven't forgotten about my covenant." So in verse 6, he says, "Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians." Again, promising that I will free you from the slaves, or from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. Again, in verse 7, makes another promise. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. He continues and says, then you will know that I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land I swore land that I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession, and then reiterates, I am the Lord. So he's telling Moses, now go repeat this, to the Israelites.
And it's funny, a minute ago I said that God wanted to reveal himself to the Egyptians with a strong power, yet it's more about his own people, the Hebrews, the Israelites, to know who he is. They need to see these plagues. They need to see the power of God. They need to see the protection that they get from God, from the most powerful army on earth. So while he is revealing himself to the Egyptians as well, I think God's bigger plan is showing his own people who he is. Because basically he just had to tell Moses, look, Moses, trust me, I have a plan, and my plan is the best plan, and it will work, guaranteed.
Right? I can see now. Well, so let's look back before, when Moses is saying, they're not going to believe, they're not going to believe, they're not going to believe. Now I can see why now he goes back to God and he's in such a kind of a frenzy. So God responds and saying, you know what, go to the Israelites and relay this message that we just read. And Moses does so. Moses and Aaron, they go down and they tell the Israelites what they were told, but they don't believe them. Now they don't believe them.
Yeah.
They didn't listen, and they didn't listen because their discouragement.
Right. They're in the pain has started now. The difficulties of following God and his plan have now started. You know how Jesus told the parable about the different soil, and the soil was basically the condition of somebody's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you hear you're going to get rescued, then it's pretty quick and easy to believe God's going to rescue us. But when that rescue doesn't happen, then it's also then just as easy to start saying, okay, well, I don't believe. Yeah, I mean, because you remember in the soil, there was a seed that would cause a plant to spring up quickly, but it didn't have good roots. And the sun dried up that plant and it's died.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that right here. As soon as, now mind you, this is real pain that
Mm-hmm.
they're feeling. This isn't some of the discomforts that we have as modern day, American citizen Christians. They're going through real pain, but it's the same thing. They were quick to believe Moses and Aaron when they're going to get rescued and they're looking forward to rescue. As soon as they see the pain involved in it, they're not so easily believing anymore.
Yeah. No, they're not. So even though he goes and reports back to the Israelites and tells them what God had the message that God had given them, they didn't listen. This is, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. So they're telling Moses, look, dude, you already made it harder for us. Don't come back here and make it twice as hard, 3 times, 4 times as hard, trying to fill us with false hope again.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't believe him. Well, Moses goes back to the Lord and he tells them, look, they don't believe me. So the Lord says to Moses, go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country. So
Didn't I do that already?
yeah, he's saying, it's like, I just
didn't go well.
No, it didn't. And he kind of rebuttals that. Moses says to the Lord, if the Israelites won't listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips? He's using the not so great with words thing again. But I mean, I could see it. He's like, man, if the Israelites won't even listen when they believed before, why would Pharaoh listen to me this time when I pretty much told him the same thing the first time and he made it harder on them?
Does your version says faltering lips?
It does say faltering. Faltering, faltering.
Yeah,
lips.
no, I believe it. Mine has an interesting choice of words there. This is the ESV. It says uncircumcised lips.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Almost like because of his sin, he's now questioning if he's even able to speak for God. That's an interesting choice of words that they used uncircumcised in the ESV.
Uncircumcised lips.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would like to look into the relevance of that.
And just quickly, let's see what New King James has.
Yeah. While you're looking that up, let's just, while you're looking that up, I'll just touch back on.
New King James says uncircumcised lips as well.
Okay, so let's ask this question too. How would you filter that to be the same kind of meaning and definition? So, what he's referring to is his speech, saying, I'm not that great with words. How is anyone going to listen to me? So, I guess in the end, it's coinciding with Moses saying that the way he speaks isn't worthy enough to give a message as such.
Okay.
Is what I'm kind of taking it as.
Because of his speech, he believes he's unworthy of it, not because of his sin.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I just, when I saw uncircumcised there, just made me think of, wow. So circumcision, which started with Abraham. So it's been around since Abraham.
Right.
Was given as a sign for his people. I'm wondering if Moses is also saying, because of his upbringing and everything, that he is not identified as well. And perhaps that's part of why they're not believing him. What you've said is the obvious and overarching emphasis in this. Moses has already said, look, I don't speak well.
Right.
And he's continuing. I'm just wondering if he's not ramping it up by using that. It's not only that I don't speak well, but my lips are also a problem.
There.
Yeah, because of my upbringing and not really the upbringing of a Hebrew. I was never a slave. I was never one of them. All that kind of stuff.
Essentially, what he's trying to do is tell God, I told you so.
Well, sure.
I think he's just coming up with more, which I think I would too, man. It's like, but that's where we find the flaw in not putting our faith before, is a walk by faith, not by sight. Yeah. Right. So he's falling into that, judge the situation off what he sees and not the faith that God has a plan. So again, even after that, we read that in verse 13, it says, now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron about the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he commanded them to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. So he's even, reconfirming what he's demanding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's got to be. Moses is in that hard place, right? Moses is asked to have more faith than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But God also met with him personally. So he should have more faith than anybody else.
Right. And here's to back that up. We won't get into the whole many, many, many scriptures, but if you continue following in these scriptures. Verse 14, it says these were the heads of their families. Well, from 14 all the way down to 25, you can see their whole family tree.
And, I think a part of why this is where it is in here and why it's important
Mhm.
is because when God revealed to Abraham that he was going to be the father of many nations and made a covenant with him at that time, he foretold or prophesied to Abraham, telling him, your descendants will have this land that you're currently in.
Mhm.
But before they have it, they will be enslaved for 400 years, for 4 generations. I think is what he says, not 400 years, 4 generations. And right here, if we follow the Levites, we see those 4 generations from Levi down to Moses and Aaron. So this little ancestry piece that's popped in here is showing us what God had told Abraham hundreds of years ago.
Right.
The 4 generations are shown right here, from Levi down to Moses and Aaron.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I thought of a kind of another reason for it, or another reason to that made it kind of interesting is, just like when you were talking about how Moses should probably have the most faith of all, because he was the one who God contacted. He's the one who God spoke to directly. And we get to read about this whole family tree here. And out of all of these people, all of these descendants of Abraham, like you said, that significance, which was really cool because I didn't even think about that part. But we get to see that Moses, out of all these people, Moses was the one God spoke to go and take care of the Israelites in Egypt. And in 26, it says, and Aaron and Moses, to whom said the Lord, or to whom the Lord said. So it was Aaron and Moses who the Lord said to bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. And it was Moses and Aaron. But I've lost I lost my space here. That's why we can't take 3 weeks off again.
Are you at the end of chapter 6?
I am at the end of chapter 6, and that's the note we're going to kind of end on. It says,
well,
now
Moses doubles down again.
Yeah.
Stop it, Mo.
Yeah, so just as we're talking now, he should have the most faith of all. And to apply this today, we as believers, we have all the tools in front of us. We have all the necessities. I mean, we have more than what they had then to read and confirm and to speak. I mean, God spoke to Moses directly, but even in those times where we as believers and as followers should be the ones that have the most faith of all, sometimes we're the ones that have the most little.
Oh, yeah.
And I can only speak for myself, but I mean, from things that I've gone through, I've had to look back on situations and be like, man, I should have had more faith in that. Like, I've gone through this many, many times before, and I could even go back to the scripture that would have helped me through this, or even the scripture I read through this and said, everything did pan out. Like, I don't know why I was so worried about it. I should have had the most faith of all.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it work time and time and time again. We've seen God come through time and time again, and yet we still doubt. Anytime there's hardship or pain or affliction in our lives, for me anyway, it seems like I still doubt, even though the first thing on my mind should be, God's come through before. Every time before, somehow it's worked out. I haven't always enjoyed it, but it works out. And this isn't about enjoyment. This is about God's plan and my part in God's plan.
Yeah. We'll finish on this note here. But as you said, the Lord, or not the Lord, Moses doubles down again on the speech. So when the Lord spoke to Moses, this is in verse 28 of chapter 6. Now, when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Then the Lord says to Moses, and we're going to continue just a little bit in chapter 7 and verse 1. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But then here's where God tells him what he's going to do in verse 3. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. This is where we get that confirmation again that God tells him he will not listen to you.
This is the second time.
Yeah. And he says, then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment, I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. So he's telling them, I will do this. Even though he's telling them, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. Go back again. Hey, he's not going to listen. But because of that, I will harden his heart, and I will bring judgment to acts of judgment. And the Egyptians will know in verse 5 that I am the Lord when I stretch my hand out against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. So in verse 6, Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded them. And we get to see in verse 7 that Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Now, take that and remember the 40 years that God spent working on Moses in the desert by himself, isolated from everything, and bring that thought back to where he's at today. If you spend 40 years without talking to anybody.
Well, he did have a wife.
Okay. Yeah. I was like,
A couple of kids,
a wife. But I mean,
outside of that, Jethro.
Outside of that, see, this is.
But he was like you're saying.
We're going to hand it over to the wise man here. This is
no, not the wise man. But the point you're making is a great point. Moses has been in a very peaceful, very outback, not easy way of life, but a serene, shall we say, way of life, where he's able to think and contemplate and be before God through all this time. And now he's in front of all these people and this mess in a hurry and this conflict and these political issues. He's thrown in the limelight. That isn't easy. So your point is super valid that Moses is coming from this desert I was going to say backwoods, but anyhow, he's coming from a living that was a peaceful living where he's shepherding sheep. He's going in and out every day doing the same type of thing, to being in front of the most powerful man on earth.
Right.
And having to talk to him. So yeah. And also, we feel like we're beating up on Moses a little bit. Moses is the one that wrote this, all right? Jesus even confirmed and referred to these as the books of Moses. So Moses is the author of this.
Right.
And is being very candid.
Yeah. He's being transparent.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to make it seem like we're bashing Moses, because I mean, to be that he is being transparent. And if we're kind of bashing Moses, I mean, how much have we talked about how much we can relate to what he's feeling and thinking and going through? Then we can only bash ourselves too. The point of this study here isn't to bash Moses per se. It's to help recognize, how much we can relate to what
Yeah.
he was doing, and how much we do that today
Right.
when we don't have to, because we do have this story. We do have this
Mhm.
book that tell us, hey, Moses went through it too. But then look how God used him once. But look at everything that panned out, even though he was questioning and curious and doubtful, just
Yeah.
as we are today. And still, they continue to do what God had called them to do, even with the doubt, even with the confusion, even with the second guessing, which he does quite a bit. And I think I can relate to that as well. I second guess a lot of things instead of just being like, you know what, God, you have a plan and I'm going to roll with it. But they continue on. It's we read in 6 that Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded them to. And then we see, we'll get into this next week here. So do you remember, Steve, back when, few chapters ago, when God was telling Moses to perform these miracles, when he was saying, what if they don't believe me?
Mhm.
Okay, well, that staff in your hand turns it into a snake. Tells him to put his hands in his pocket, and he comes out all,
Leprous.
and he puts it back in and it goes away. And then he tells him, take water from the river and pour it on the sand, and so he gives him these signs. And what really stood out to me was remembering the staff.
Mhm.
When we continue next week, we'll get to read that Aaron's staff now becomes that snake, in the same way that God used that sign with Moses. We get to see that same sign used with Aaron. I almost said Eric. So you stumped me on the Moses had his whole family there, but God completely forgot about that because we were so focused on this isolation period of Moses that I forgot that he did have somewhat of a circle, just nobody from the outside, But join us next week, and we get to see kind of the works that Aaron gets to show, and what God's going to do through him and Moses together, more than what he's trying to do now. We thank you for joining us. Join us next week as we continue this journey of Moses in this series, Men of the Bible. We thank you, and God bless.